The Gnostic tradition contains a story that does not fit the framework most people bring to it. A story that complicates the simple good versus evil cosmological map that popular presentations of Gnosticism have made standard. The map in which the Archons are simply evil, the material world is simply a prison, and the spiritual path is simply the soul's escape from both. The story is the story of Sabaoth, and it does not fit that map because it describes an Archon who saw the truth, chose the light, and was changed by the choice. Not in a way that removed him from the intermediate realm he governed, but in a way that fundamentally altered what that realm was for. Sabaoth is the seventh and highest of the Archon rulers in the Gnostic cosmological framework. He governs the outermost of the 7 Archon heavens, the level closest to the Pleroma, the level through which every ascending soul must pass last before it reaches genuine divine territory. In the standard Archon cosmology preserved in the Apocryphon of John and the related Sethian texts, the Archon rulers are defined by their distortions. Each one governs a heaven in which a genuine Pleroma quality has been corrupted by the Demiurge's ignorance into something that sustains the material world's administration rather than facilitating the soul's return. Providence corrupted into fate, divinity corrupted into jealous ownership, lordship corrupted into domination. But the Hypostasis of the Archons, one of the Nag Hammadi texts, a Sethian document of the 2nd or 3rd century CE, tells a different story about Sabaoth, a story in which the highest Archon does something none of the other Archon rulers do. He repents. Not in the moral sense of regretting specific wrongdoing, in the Gnostic technical sense of metanoia, the turning of the mind and will toward the genuine light that the Archon domain had always been blocking. Sabaoth looks upward, literally upward, toward the Pleroma that his father Yaldabaoth had always prevented the Archon court from perceiving, and he sees Sophia. And in seeing Sophia, he sees something the Demiurge's construction has always been designed to prevent the Archons from seeing, that the Pleroma's light is real, that it is infinitely greater than the counterfeit light the Demiurge radiates, and that his entire existence as an administrator of the Demiurge's domain has been structured around a lie about which of these two lights is ultimate. He turns, and the Pleroma responds. The Hypostasis of the Archons describes what happens when Sabaoth turns in specific detail that is worth examining closely, because it encodes a teaching about the nature of genuine conversion that the mainstream tradition has always found inconvenient. It does not describe a dramatic rescue of Sabaoth from the Archon domain, an elevation that removes him entirely from the intermediate realm and places him in the Pleroma proper. It describes something more precise and more practical. Sophia comes down to him, or more precisely, the Sophia principle, the divine feminine wisdom that had been moving through the material world since her fall, descends to the level of Sabaoth's repentance and meets him there. And she establishes him, in his repentance, in a position above his father Yaldabaoth and his brother Yal, in the 7th heaven, but in a 7th heaven that has been transformed by his repentance from an Archon domain into something closer to a genuine intermediate realm. Sophia gives Sabaoth a great light. She gives him a 4-faced chariot of cherubim, the symbol in the Jewish mystical tradition of divine throne mysticism, the vehicle of the most direct possible encounter with the divine presence available within the intermediate realm. She gives him a multitude of angels from the light as servants, and she gives him, crucially, her daughter Zoe, life as a daughter, the life principle. The specific quality of Pleroma vitality that the Archon domain by its nature cannot generate on its own. What this means cosmologically is precise. Sabaoth does not become a Pleroma aeon. He remains in the 7th heaven, in the intermediate realm, at the boundary between the Archon domain and the divine territory above it. But the 7th heaven he governs after his repentance is qualitatively different from the 7th heaven he governed before it. Before the repentance, the 7th heaven was simply the highest level of the Archon prison, the most beautiful and most convincing version of the counterfeit light, the level at which the soul ascending from death might most easily mistake its location for the Pleroma. After the repentance, the 7th heaven has become a genuine threshold, a level that, while not the Pleroma itself, genuinely points toward the Pleroma rather than substituting for it. Sabaoth's repentant 7th heaven is the level at which the ascending soul, if it has developed sufficient gnosis, can receive a quality of recognition that is not available at any of the lower Archon levels. The recognition that the genuine divine reality exists, that the Pleroma is real, that the turning toward it that the entire Gnostic path has been preparing the soul for is a turning towards something that is actually there. The hypostasis of the Archons contrasts Sabaoth's response to the light with Yaldabaoth's response explicitly, and the contrast is one of the most psychologically precise passages in all of Gnostic literature. The Demiurge, when the light of the Pleroma penetrates into his domain, responds with an intensification of the behavior the light is exposing as insufficient. He asserts his authority more forcefully. He declares himself God more emphatically. He builds more Archon levels, more elaborate mechanisms of control, more sophisticated systems for maintaining the souls within his domain in a state of permanent identification with his construction rather than with the Pleroma above it. The Demiurge's response to genuine light is to generate more of his counterfeit version of it. Sabaoth's response is the opposite. He looks at the genuine light and recognizes it as what he has always been serving a counterfeit of. And the recognition produces not the intensification of his Archon behavior, but its transformation. The administrator becomes a servant, the warden becomes a guide. The Archon who was maintaining the seventh heaven as the final layer of the Archon prison becomes the being who establishes his seventh heaven as the threshold of genuine divine encounter. What changed? Not Sabaoth's position in the cosmic hierarchy. He remains in the intermediate realm, not his fundamental nature. The hypostasis does not claim he became a Pleroma aeon or ceased to be what he was. What changed is his orientation, his turning, the specific interior direction of his consciousness, from the downward orientation that characterizes the entire Archon domain, the orientation toward the material world and its administration, to the upward orientation that characterizes the pneumatic consciousness, the orientation toward the Pleroma and what it actually is. This is why the story of Sabaoth is not a cosmological curiosity, but a practical teaching. Because the interior movement that Sabaoth makes, the turning from the counterfeit light toward the genuine, the recognition that what the counterfeit light was imitating is real, and that imitation was never sufficient, is exactly the interior movement that the Gnostic path is designed to produce in every pneumatic soul. Sabaoth's story is the soul's story. The highest Archon within you, the most sophisticated, most convincing, most Pleroma-adjacent dimension of the Archon conditioning that has been administering your experience, can see the genuine light, can transform the seventh heaven of your inner life from the final layer of the Archon prison into the threshold of genuine divine encounter. The pistis Sophia adds a dimension to Sabaoth's story that the hypostasis of the Archons only implies. It describes Sabaoth's transformed seventh heaven as the level at which the soul ascending through the Archon realms after death encounters something qualitatively different from what it encountered at the lower 6 levels. At the lower levels, the Archon powers make their claims. You belong to us. You came from us. You cannot pass. And the soul that has developed genuine Gnosis answers with the precise counter-recognition that each claim requires. But at Sabaoth's level, at the seventh heaven transformed by his repentance, the soul encounters not another Archon claim, but a genuine orientation toward the Pleroma, a pointing rather than a blocking, a threshold rather than another wall. This means that the soul which arrives at Sabaoth's heaven with genuine Gnosis does not need to counter a claim at this level. It needs only to recognize and accept the orientation that Sabaoth's repentance established. The seventh heaven, in its transformed state, is the level at which the ascending soul can finally, clearly, without the distortion that the lower Archon heavens imposed, perceive the direction of the Pleroma. Not the Pleroma itself, the soul is still in the intermediate realm, but the direction, the genuine pointing toward the real. And that pointing, after the navigation of 6 levels of Archon claim and counter-recognition, is an enormous gift. It is the gift that Sabaoth's defection made possible. The highest Archon saw the light, turned toward it, and in turning, established within the very structure of the Archon domain a permanent threshold toward the genuine.
I have created a free guide to accompany this teaching. It is called Sabaoth's Defection, a Gnostic guide to recognizing and crossing the threshold. Inside you will find the specific Gnostic practices for cultivating the quality of upward orientation that Sabaoth's story models, for developing within the conditions of embodied life.
The interior turning that transforms the highest levels of Archon conditioning from walls into thresholds. The link is in the description below. The practical teaching of Sabaoth's defection is the teaching that the Gnostic tradition was most careful to encode precisely rather than simply state, because its implication, stated too bluntly, produce either despair or complacency, rather than the specific quality of active engagement the tradition was trying to cultivate. Here it is stated precisely. The Archon conditioning within you is not uniform. The mechanisms of desire and fear and identity that the Gnostic path has been analyzing throughout this series do not all operate at the same level or with the same relationship to the genuine divine. Some of the Archon mechanisms within your own consciousness have, through the accumulated practice of genuine Gnosis, already begun the movement that Sabaoth models. They have already begun the turning from the downward orientation of pure material identification toward the upward orientation of genuine pneumatic awareness. They have not been eliminated. They have not been transformed into Pleroma qualities, but they have been oriented differently. They are beginning to point toward the genuine rather than simply substituting for it. This is what the 10,000 moments of genuine recognition, the 10,000 interior pauses in which you saw the Archon mechanism clearly and touched, even briefly, the awareness that was not the mechanism, have been producing, not the elimination of the Archon conditioning, but its gradual reorientation, the progressive transformation of the inner Archon levels, from walls into thresholds, from mechanisms that block the upward orientation into mechanisms that, touched by genuine Gnosis often enough and honestly enough, begin to participate in the upward orientation rather than obstruct it. Sabaoth saw the genuine light and turned. That seeing and turning is available to every dimension of your inner life that has been administering experience as an Archon mechanism. The quality of repentance the Hypostasis describes is not a moral category, it is a cosmological one. The turning of consciousness from the counterfeit toward the genuine, from the administration of the Demiurge's domain toward the orientation of the Pleroma's light. Practice it in the specific dimensions of your inner life, where the Archon conditioning is most sophisticated and most apparently Pleroma adjacent, in the highest reaches of your spiritual identity, in the most refined forms of your seeking, in the places where the counterfeit light is most convincing, precisely because it is the most beautiful. Those are your seventh heavens. Let them see Sophia. Let them turn. Let the highest Archon within you defect. Subscribe to the Gnostic Archive, where we trace Sabaoth's journey week by week, because his defection is the map for ours, and the map is needed now more than ever. The Hypostasis of the Archons gives us one more detail about Sabaoth's transformation that carries enormous practical weight for the Gnostic practitioner. After Sabaoth turns and is established in the seventh heaven with Sophia's gifts of light and life, the text says, he built a great assembly of four-faced angels, his ministers, and after these things he built a great assembly hall, where the angels dwell. The hall contains the throne, the chariot of cherubim, the seraphim of praise, and Sophia takes her daughter, whom she named Life, and sets her at Sabaoth's right hand to teach him about the things that exist in the eighth heaven, the realm directly above the Archon levels, the threshold of the genuine Pleroma territory. Sophia sets Life at Sabaoth's right hand to teach him about the things above. The highest Archon, having turned, is now being taught by the Pleroma about what exists above the domain he has spent his entire existence administering. He is not simply oriented upward, he is being educated in the nature of what he is oriented toward. The repentance is not completed by the turning. It continues in the learning that the turning makes possible, and the learning is transmitted by Zoe Life, the daughter of the Sophia principle, the specific quality of Pleroma vitality the Archon domain cannot generate on its own, and that the Demiurge's construction has always been designed to substitute for, with the specific counterfeit vitality of material aliveness. This means that the transformation of Sabaoth's seventh heaven is an ongoing process rather than a completed event. The seventh heaven after Sabaoth's repentance is not a finished product, a permanently transformed Archon level waiting passively for ascending souls to pass through it. It is a level that continues to be shaped by the ongoing transmission from Life, by the continuing education of the highest Archon in the nature of what lies above his domain. And this continuing education changes what the seventh heaven offers to the soul that arrives at it with genuine Gnosis. Not simply a pointer in the direction of the Pleroma, but a progressively more accurate and more detailed orientation toward what the Pleroma actually is. For the practitioner, this means something concrete. The highest levels of your own inner life, the most sophisticated, most Pleroma-adjacent dimensions of your consciousness are not simply waiting to be dissolved by the development of genuine Gnosis. They are capable of the same kind of ongoing education that Sabaoth receives from life. The dimensions of your experience that have already turned toward the genuine, that have already begun the reorientation from downward identification to upward recognition, are dimensions that can continue to be educated by the Sophia principle's presence within your practice. The turning was the beginning, the education is the continuation. And the education never ends, because what the Pleroma contains, what the eighth heaven above Sabaoth's transformed seventh heaven consists of, exceeds any finite period of learning. Sabaoth's story is the Gnostic tradition's most specific answer to the question that every genuine practitioner eventually asks: is it actually possible to change the inner Archon mechanisms, rather than simply learning to see through them? The answer the tradition gives through Sabaoth's story is yes, not by eliminating them, not by replacing them with something that has no relationship to what they were, by turning them, by orienting the intelligence that the Archon mechanisms contain, and they do contain genuine intelligence however distorted, in the direction of what lies above them, and by allowing the Sophia principle, working through the practice of genuine Gnosis, to educate that turned intelligence in the nature of what it has turned toward. This is what the transformation of the seventh heaven consists of. This is what the transformation of your own most sophisticated inner Archon levels consists of when you bring genuine recognition to them consistently enough, turn them, educate them, let them become thresholds rather than walls, let the seventh heaven within you do what Sabaoth did, see the genuine light and move toward it. Subscribe to the Gnostic archive. The defection is available. The education has begun. The defection of Sabaoth carries one final teaching that the tradition preserved in the Hypostasis's closing lines, a teaching about what happens to Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, when he discovers that his own highest Archon has turned against him. The text says that when Yaldabaoth saw his son Sabaoth shine with such great authority, and that Sophia was at his right hand, he felt envy for him, and having become angry, he engendered death out of his death, and set it over the sixth heaven. This is the Gnostic tradition's most precise statement of what the Archon system does when a defection occurs within it. It generates the experience of death as a threat specifically aimed at the soul that has begun to turn. The fear of loss, of the death of what the turning requires releasing, is not random. It is the Demiurge's specific countermove against the consciousness that has begun to do what Sabaoth did. Yaldabaoth sets death over the sixth heaven specifically because Sabaoth, the seventh heaven, has defected. The death anxiety intensifies directly below the level at which the turning has occurred. This is the invisible war in its most cosmological form. When the highest inner Archon turns, the second highest generates the fear of what the turning costs. Recognize this pattern in your own experience. The fear that intensifies immediately below your highest level of genuine recognition is Yaldabaoth's death, set over the sixth heaven in response to Sabaoth's defection. It is not a reason to stop. It is the confirmation that the defection is real. Hold the turn. Let Sabaoth's seventh heaven remain oriented. The death in the sixth heaven cannot reach what has genuinely turned above it. The story of Sabaoth reveals something that every practitioner of the Gnostic path needs to understand about the nature of genuine transformation, a truth that the simple good versus evil framing of Gnostic cosmology consistently obscures. The Archon realm is not a realm of pure obstruction. It is a realm of distortion. And distortion, by its very nature, contains within it a relationship to the genuine that pure negation does not. The Archon powers carry stolen light. They administer distorted versions of genuine Pleroma qualities, and precisely because they contain a relationship to the genuine, however distorted, however stolen, however corrupted by the Demiurge's ignorance, they are capable of the movement that Sabaoth models, the recognition that the genuine exists, that the distorted version has always been oriented away from rather than toward the genuine, and the turning that orients the distorted quality back toward its source. Sabaoth saw Sophia and recognized her as the genuine principle that his father's construction had always been a distortion of, and in that recognition, the distortion became a threshold rather than a wall. The stolen light became an orientation device rather than a substitute. The Archon became a guide rather than a warden. This is the cosmological basis for the Gnostic practitioner's relationship to the inner Archon mechanisms, not their destruction, but their reorientation. Not the elimination of desire, but its turning toward what it was always actually reaching for beneath the Archon's counterfeit object, not the suppression of fear, but its recognition as the distorted form of the genuine caution that the soul's authentic intelligence produces about what actually threatens the pneumatic spark rather than what the Archon system claims threatens it. The Archons contain the seed of their own transformation. Sabaoth's defection is the proof. Your inner Archons contain the same seed. Water it with genuine recognition. Watch what turns.